Hello guys, welcome back again to my online classroom, and this is Wasi. And from the very beginning of my lecture today, I'd like to introduce the topic that I'm going to talk about today, that is causative verbs. You know, causative verbs is one of the most important part in English grammar. So let's start. So to start the topic, causative verbs, from the very beginning, I'd like to give you the answer of the questions. Actually, what do you mean by the word causative verbs? Causative verbs are basically those verbs who can help you to do anything with the help of a person or a thing. I repeat, causative verbs are those verbs who can help you to do anything with the help of a person or a thing. Now you ask questions, who are causative verbs? If I want to give the answers, who are causative verbs? There are many verbs in causative verbs, like inform is the causative verb, show is the causative verb, feed is the causative verb. But the fact, most of the verbs in English grammar, they can work causative verbs directly. They need help from few specific verbs. And when we talk about the causative verbs, we basically try to indicate those verbs who can help other verbs to make causative. And these verbs are have, get, let, make, help. I'm going to write down these verbs in the clause. Yeah, the verbs who can help you to make causative verbs are basically have, get, let, make, and help. Basically, these 5 verbs are considered as causative verbs in English, and most of the exam you'll get the problems of using these verbs as causative verbs. Because if you want to use these verbs as causative verbs, you need to follow few specific rules. Because, like, if you want to use these verbs in causative verbs, first of all, you need to bring in 2 subjects with these subjects. One is subject 1, and the verb that is should be before of these verbs. And you also need a subject 2 after these verbs. So, if you want to use these verbs as causative verbs in English sentence, you need 2 subjects. Subject 1, that should be in the first positions of this verb, and you need a subject 2 after these verbs. And the most important thing, then you need to bring the verb, that is the main verb, after subject 2. And if our English sentence follow this structure, that is have, get, let, make, help, and with having 2 subjects and a specific main verb, then you can say the verb, the sentence is in a causative verb structure sentence. But in the question, in exam, most of the cases you'll get questions from causative verbs on the fact of using main verb. Because these causative verbs follow few specific rules of defining the form, actual form of these main verbs. Because of this causative verb, sometimes you can get this main verb in a base form, or you can get this main verb in infinitive form, or you can get this base form, a main verb in a past participle form. So the question, why you'll take base form, why you'll take infinitive form, and why you'll take verb 3? Actually, it completely depends on the formation or the position of subject 2 in the sentence. Because if this subject 2 can follow 2 structure, sometimes it can follow in active tone, or it can goes on a passive tone. If it is an active tone, then the main verb follows specific form, or if it is in a passive tone, then the main verb follows specific tone. So that is the rules you'll have to know of using when you'll go to use have, get, let, make, help in an English sentence. Now I'm going to tell you details about the fact of using have, get, let, make, help in an English sentence as causative verbs. First of all, I'd like to talk about using the fact of have. If you want to use have as a causative verb in this sentence, you need to bring a subject 2. And if it is in the active tone, subject 2, then the verb, main verb, should be in a base form. Or it can be in passive tone. I'm going to write down this. Have, subject 2, can be a passive tone. Then you need to bring the past participle form of the verb. So again I repeat, if it in case of have, this is the subject 2 part. The subject 2 can be in active tone or it can be passive tone. If it is an active tone, the main verb should be in a verb base form. If it is in passive tone, the main verb should be in a first participle form. Sometimes this active tone or subject to, if it is an active tone, in the subject to, you can define it as a doer few cases. Most of the people define this as a doer if it's an active tone. And if it is a passive tone, you can also define this as a receiver. So there are few cases, there are few people who define subject to doer when it is an active tone, and they also define subject to as a receiver when it is a passive tone. But whatever you say, doer, receiver, or active, passive, the structure should be the similar. If it's an active tone or doer format, the verb should be in a base form. And if it is in passive tone or a receiver format, the verb should be in past participle form. Now I'm going to give an example with this. Like, I have a man wash my car. Look at the example, what happens. In the sentence, I'm using have as in causative verbs because the verb has two subjects, I, this is subject 1, and a man, this is subject 2. So I can define this have as working as a causative verb. Now the question, why I'm using wash in this sentence, not washing, washes, not washed, because in the sentence, I'm used subject to a man. And a man can work this, can do this work in the sentence mentioned, that is washed, directly. So it is in an active tone, and because of being active tone of the subject to, I'm using wash, and that is the V0 format. In this case, I can't use washes or washed, nothing, because of the active tone of subject to in this sentence, and that is the main fact of causative verbs. But if it is in passive tone, then what happens? Like, I have my car washed by a man. Look at the example. In the sentence, again I'm using have, and the have has two subjects, I and my car. And look at the subject to, my car. This is not in active tone, this is in passive tone. So you can define subject to as a receiver, and because of being receiver, you need to bring the past participle form of the main verb, and that is washed. In that case, you can't use other forms of the verb. You have to use washed because subject to is in a passive tone or receiver format. And that is the fact of a causative verb. And that is the rules of using have in a causative verbs. And some sort of specific rules you have to apply in case of get, in case of late, in case of make, in case of help. Now I'm going to talk about details, the other rules of have, get, late, make, and help. So now take second rules for the get. In case of get, the rules are almost similar because if you want to use get, you need to subject to, and if it is an active tone, I mean doer format, you need to bring the infinitive form of the main verb. I repeat, not directly the base form, you need to bring the infinitive form of the main verb. And if it is in passive tone, in case of get, the subject to, you can define this as a receiver. Then you need to bring the past participle form, that is verb 3 form, in case of main verb. So for the get, the rules is simple. That is, if you want to use get as a causative verb, if the subject to is an active or doer format, you need to bring the infinitive form. If it is in passive tone or receiver format, you need to bring the past participle form. Now, I'd like to give the example of the rules of late. What happens in late? In case of late, that is just almost similar with few difference. In case of late, if subject to is in an active tone, I mean in a doer format, you need to bring the base form of the verb almost similar to the have format. But if it is in a passive format, passive, you can define this as a receiver. Then the verb should be be plus verb 3 format. That is, you have to use the first participle form of the verb, but before that you need to bring the be. Just be, not am, just be. Be done, be gone. And for the make, what is the rules of using causative verbs as causative verbs? The fourth noun. In case of make, if you want to use make as a causative verb, this is very interesting because if it is an active or passive, the structure should be similar. That is, if it is an active or it is a passive, what happens? it is a doer or receiver, the main form of the verb should be base form. Remember, in case of make, using as a causative verb, the main verb should be always base form if it is in an active tone or if it is in passive tone. And the last one, help. If you want to use help as a causative verb, it is almost similar of the fact using make. I'm going to write down this. In case of help, as in causative verb, you need to bring a subject to, and subject to can be an active or it can be a passive. Whatever you can say, it's a doer or it's a receiver, whatever. Then the verb should be in a base form. But in that case, you can also use the infinitive form. Though this is not much used, most of the cases we use the base form. And that's the fact of using causative verbs. I repeat, basically the 5 specific causative verbs, if you want to use these, they can follow the 2 tone, active and passive tone. And for every tone, you need to know the specific form of using main verb. In case of have, if it's an active tone, you need to use the base form. In case of passive tone, you need to use the past participle form. In case of get, in active tone, you have to bring the infinitive form of the verb. In passive tone, you have to use the past participle form of the verb. In case of late, in active tone, you have to use the base form of the verb. In passive tone, you have to use the base verb 3 with be. I mean be plus past participle form of the verb. In case of make, whatever it is, active or passive, you have to use the base form of the verb. And in case of help, whatever it is, active or passive, doer or receiver, you have to use base form. Or you can use the infinitive form. But most of the cases, we use the base form. And that is the main concept of causative verb. So now I'd like to give you a quiz. On the screen, you are watching a few questions based on my discussion. Basically, I have given you 2 examples. One was I have a man wash my car. Another was I have my car washed by a man. Using the same concept and the formula that I given in my lecture, based on this, I have prepared this quiz. I'll suggest you can go through my lecture again, and I believe then you can be able to give the answers. And announcement is that who can give the answers with first 3 positions, you'll get reward from the classroom family. So I repeat, you can go to the lecture again and try to answer the questions. Okay guys, so that's all for today. And within a short time, I'll back again with a new lecture. Till then, hope for the best. Stay with the classroom, make more, like, share and comments. Goodbye.